I'm with Shekhar Gupta, the editor-in-chief of ThePrint, and we are discussing the Trump visit to India. Has the US President Donald Trump improved India-US ties? Shekhar, even as we speak, Donald Trump is in Rashtrapati Bhavan, where he's being hosted by President Ramnath Kovind. Of course, Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his cabinet are there. Sonia Gandhi, the leader of the Congress party, has not been invited, but we will talk about this and many other questions. Also, Shekhar, Delhi has been burning these last several hours. 10 people have been killed. And actually, there is a question on that, so perhaps we can just start with that. This gentleman, he doesn't want to give his name. He calls himself the neutral man, where he says, building a wall, cleaning up roads, cleaning up the Yamuna and the Taj Mahal, horrible smog at Rashtrapati Bhavan, and now extreme violence in Delhi. Do you think that this visit by Donald Trump has further deteriorated India's image in the world?
Well, certainly the riots in Delhi and what's been happening in Delhi and the failure of the government to be seen to be even sincerely handling it or responding to it has done great damage to brand India. It has done damage to brand India, and overseas it's done damage to brand Modi as well. Narendra Modi will not care, or his supporters will say he doesn't care, because it doesn't damage his brand within India, definitely among his voters. But yes, this is not good for India. There is no such thing as a good time or ideal time to have a riot. A riot is always bad, but to have a riot at this time, when the entire world's attention is not just on India but on New Delhi, is very unfortunate and a real shame.
But you saw, Shekhar, that in the several the one press conference and the several meetings that Trump had, and he was asked at the press conference repeatedly about whether he brought up the question of religious freedoms in India, and he was very, very complimentary of Prime Minister Modi. He said, he's a good friend of mine, and I asked him this question on religious freedom, but he gave me a very good and very satisfactory answer about 200 million Indian Muslims living very happily in India. So what do you make of that?
Well, first of all, you don't expect a foreign head of state to say anything that will offend his hosts, even in the worst of times, even when relationship is not so good. In this case, relationship is good. It's not as if Narendra Modi is Angela Merkel. Angela Merkel says critical things of Trump. So
the Chancellor of Germany.
Yeah, Chancellor of Germany, but he also says not nice things. So if it was something like that, you would expect him to say nasty things. So he would not. I think if they speak with each other, they'll do it discreetly. But he let one word slip while he was answering this question at his press conference. He said, I talked to him not just about Muslims, but also Christians. And then he did not elaborate. I suspect that's because he also comes with a message from the Christian groups in America who've been complaining about the funding of Indian Christian charities having been stopped and action under FCRA, etc.
Right. So it's equally important to Trump that Christians and Muslims, but especially Christians, are treated well.
I'd say that politically Christians is what he'll bother about. Muslims, he obviously can't say I don't care, but I don't think there's anything on his CV or his track record so far that says that he loves the Muslims anymore than maybe the BJP.
Right. So this question, Shekhar, was asked by Arpit Mathur, the one that you just answered, where he said that does the US change the Indian government's mind on dealing with minorities? And there's another question by somebody called IMVY, who says, does it make sense to engage with Trump this late in his presidency? And are we sure, is India sure that he is going to get re-elected?
Well, first of all, no country, no leader can make another country, another large sovereign country change its mind unless there is a relationship of dependence, unless it's a client-principal relationship. India and the US have never had a client-principal relationship. They don't have one now, and I don't suspect they're going to have one ever, at least in the foreseeable future. So America or any American leader does not have that leverage. Leverage comes from a couple of things. One, it comes most commonly from shared vested interests, joint interests, that look, if you do this, it becomes uncomfortable for me to do this. So let's find a way around this. Or it comes because of moral authority or friendship. Now everybody calls everybody a friend these days. Modi calls Trump a friend, Trump calls Modi a friend. Really, I mean, you can't have two human beings that far apart. I don't think in his personal life Trump has many friends. And I think you can quite see that Narendra Modi doesn't have many personal friends either. So I don't think friendship matters in that sense, or friendship works in that sense. And the time when global leaders had moral authority over each other, they listened to each other, those times are gone. If you read the old conversations, say between Nehru and Eisenhower, or even Vajpayee and George Bush, I think those times are now over.
Right. So the question then arises.
These are essentially transactional leaders. And also, these are leaders who, much more than loving A, B, C, D, E, F, G, they enjoy the fact, they revel in the fact that they are loved by tens of millions of people. So what drives them is the adulation they get. They don't necessarily feel the need to give it back to anybody.
So are you then referring to what happened in Ahmedabad yesterday when this huge stadium, the Motera Stadium, full of 100,000 Indians and perhaps more, greeted Trump in this hugely adulatory way? I mean, Prime Minister Modi, of course. What did you make of that?
Well, I was, first of all, personally, I was very happy with this. I was very happy because I've spent much of my adult life, and in fact, growing up life, even before my adult life, even as a child, in a system where a completely fake or completely mythical sense of anti-Americanism was built. Now, those were the days of the Cold War. There was the American-Pakistani Security Alliance, etc., etc. But this business of America is bad, Soviet Union is good. While everybody wanted their children to go to America, everybody wanted freebies from America, everybody wanted visas from America, we are children of, I would say, we are a generation of hypocrites. So 3 generations of Indians grew up in this hypocrisy, where everybody secretly desired America, but had to pretend that America was the great evil, the great Satan. So in fact, I wish I had got this line out, but Jairam Ramesh had this line and he must get the credit. He said the principle here seems to be Yankee go home, but take me with you. So I think with this one, anti-Americanism, which was a fake mythical construct in India, has been finally buried. Remember, over 10 years back, after the nuclear deal, when Manmohan Singh said to George Bush in America, the President Bush, people of India love you very dearly. Think of just remember the amount of criticism he got, not just from the BJP. BJP actually accused him of having sold away India to America, just as Jahangir had sold away India to East India Company, right? Or the Britons. But he was attacked also by the Congress people, definitely by the left. But today, an American president, that too Donald Trump, who is a liberal hate figure, as there hasn't been one since I don't know who. Maybe, I think they were, I don't know who, at least not post-World War. For him to get this kind of reception in India, Ahmedabad, and for India's left to not even be able to collect 500 people in any city of the world, including Calcutta, to protest, tells you that his anti-Americanism has now been buried. And since I'm talking about this, let me tell you something. Look at the city of Delhi. In Delhi, there isn't one street. Actually, there's one, but I'll tell you about that. There isn't one street of any size, any significance, which is named after any American. Not even after Einstein. Right? But we have named street after every thug, every mass murderer, every killer, every tyrant from Cold War days.
That's a bit excessive, Shekhar.
No, it is true, because all these are thugs after whom nothing will be named in their home countries. Find me what the Yugoslavs or former Yugoslavs will name after Tito. We drive home, so many of us drive home of Joseph Broz Tito Marg. Who remembers Tito? Jamal Abdul Nasir, right?
Those were the good old days of the non-aligned movement when India had to balance its relationship.
No, India was balancing nothing. India was frankly bullshitting its way out of those decades because India's foreign policy got linked with domestic policy, and Mrs. Gandhi came with limited intellect and she got surrounded by these people. So you built this anti-Americanism which was completely unnecessary. Look at the 60s. Through the 60s, you depended on the Americans for your grain, right? So your
PL480.
PL480, because you had ship to mouth existence. In fact, newspaper stories on front page used to say one more ship has arrived in Bombay today. In that period, your strategic ally was Soviet Union. So while you got your food from America for more or less for free in a humiliating arrangement, we kept on abusing America in public and cozying up to Soviet Union. I'm so glad that after 7 decades, that hypocrisy has now been buried. I find that India's foreign policy today, this is irrespective of Modi, Manmohan Singh, Vajpayee, is now truly non-aligned and truly independent.
But having said that, Shekhar, you just called this a transaction. You said both Modi and Trump are transactional leaders. You're saying that the hypocrisy of the so-called non-aligned movement has finally been buried. But what do you make of the trip? Why has Trump come to India in the first place? Is the Indian American community in the US so important for him in an election year, especially?
Well, if you look at these great populists around the world now, their essential need is to, one, keep their popularity levels at home, and second, to keep winning elections. Right. None of them would take any risk that might lose them a single vote. And when I say great populists, I don't just mean Modi and Trump and Erdogan and Netanyahu. I also mean someone like, say, Arvind Kejriwal. Yeah. Now, see how he's walking on eggshells over troubles in Delhi because he doesn't want to risk losing one Hindu vote. So that is the way these leaders today think. Today's leaders around the world, unfortunately, or maybe that's how things are, do not see public office as public trust. So they are not willing to pay any price or take any risk there. Right. So Trump comes to India, he wants trade. He also has strategic interest in India. He also has to humor India because just 3 days from now, he wants to sign his Afghan peace deal. And from that process, India has been kept completely out. Completely out. India has never been so out of that. Although I'm very happy. I once wrote an article that said, leave AF to Pak. Right? Everybody says AF Pak region because everybody, every great power which at the peak of its glory grows the hubris to think they can go and colonize Afghanistan. So the Britons tried this in the 19th century. See what happened. Kipling has written a whole lot of literature on how the British were humiliated and massacred in Afghanistan. They lost. Yeah. Then the Soviet Union, at the peak of its power, thought they could do something with Afghanistan. They lost out. Soviet Union broke up. Then the Americans thought they will come and fix it. 20 years, they are going back humiliated, defeated, with an abject surrender. So if the Pakistanis now think they can fix Afghanistan, be my guests. India should stay out of it and let the Pakistanis deal with Afghanistan. But having said that, that might be rhetorical flourish on my part. But the fact is that from this Afghan peace process, India has been kept completely out. And I know how MEA thinks, and I know how the conservative Indian Foreign Service thinks. They think they have a role in everything. They have zero role in this. And so Trump doesn't want India to create problems. Trump also knows that some of the people on one side in Afghanistan, the current government, are friendly with India.
The Ashraf Ghani lot.
Ashraf Ghani lot. So even when he was asked a question today on Afghanistan, the peace deal, he said India is with it. India is very happy with it. India really wants it. I don't think so, but I'm quite sure India does not have a choice, and because it's a transactional relationship, India has accepted that. So that's the second one, that all right, you are out of Afghanistan, I want my troops out, but I treat you at a level very different from where I would put Pakistan, even though they are helping me in Afghanistan. And third is the votes. Now, Indian population may be only 1.3% of America. Right. They're just about 4.4 million people, 44 lakh people. And it's also true that they have large concentrations in states which are pre-decided in America, like New York, California, Illinois, because those have the big cities, Chicago, LA, San Francisco, and New York. Washington. So those usually go to Democrats. But there are many states, particularly some of the swing states, which last time Donald Trump won. And these are the 4 states, in fact, that in the previous election, that is Florida, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, which had been won in the previous elections by Obama. So Democrats see a chance of getting these back. In fact, if I look at these, Pennsylvania had not voted for Republicans since 1988. And similarly, Wisconsin had not voted for Republicans since 1984. So he won these states, and these 4 states gave him 46 electoral college votes. Those 46 won him the election. Because if the Democrats had kept these states, which were actually their states, if they had retained these states, then Hillary would have got 273 electoral college votes. Right. Trump would have got 258. 270 is the halfway mark. It's a very interesting situation, America as well as India. In India, halfway mark is 272. Yeah. In America, in the electoral college system, the halfway mark is 270.
So in this complicated American system...
In these states, there is sufficient number of Indians who can tilt the balance, because if you look at these 4 states, the total gap of votes in these 4 states in Trump's favor were just 110,000. Yeah. That's all in 4 states. In fact, if you look at it nationally in America, Trump lost by nearly 3 million votes on the popular vote. But it's the way the system works that when you win a state, the winner takes all. So these 4 states swung the election for him. Okay. So it's very crucial for him. And it's also true, every survey, every report, all data tells you that approximately 80% Indians voted for Hillary Clinton in 2016. Right. Even a reliable poll in 2018 tells you that Trump's approval rating among people of Indian origin is only 28%. Okay. So for him, it's important to take away as many of these votes as possible. And now he thinks, because there's a large Gujarati community, they are Modi's voters, essentially Gujarati upper caste Hindus. So he thinks that whatever he can switch to his side gives him support in these states. Texas is getting closer now. Florida is a crucial state, and these are all states in which Texas is nearly 3 lakh Indians. So no surprise that Howdy Modi took place in Houston. Right.
So, Shekhar, some related questions on the Indian American community and Bernie Sanders, one of the Democrat candidates. So Sanka Medhi is asking, if Bernie does win, does it impact the US-India relationship as his deputies are speaking actively about Kashmir? And then there's another Kashmir-related question where Sajal Mitra is asking, what is the motive of Trump raising Kashmir again and again when India has rebuffed him every time?
Well, first of all, India has not rebuffed him. I think Trump and this America are friends of India. They are not hostile to India. Also, the world by and large, barring some nutcases in Europe, does not believe that there can be any change in the status of Kashmir. Nor does anybody want to upset the status quo as it exists now. Now, if somebody's asked Trump a question, think about it. First of all, it's a good thing that at least he's answering questions. Our Prime Minister does not even answer questions in his own country. He has his counterpart from another country coming to his country and answering questions. Right. So good thing that Trump takes questions. So if he's asked a question on Kashmir, would you rather that he say, I can't answer this, right? Or do you expect him to say Kashmir is an inalienable part of India, etc., etc.?
Unlikely.
No, you may want him to say it, but not likely that he will say it. So I think he's been very cautious, and he said the right thing. He said it's a thorn between the two sides. There are two sides to a story. Yeah. I think it's a fair comment that he has made. Certainly, the sort of the Indian partisans would not even have liked to hear that. Yeah. If nothing else, they would have preferred for him to say, I will not talk about this, this is India's internal affair. But the fact is that it isn't India's internal affair, and it's not possible for...
It isn't India's internal affair.
It is not, because even for India's claims, we just had the anniversary of our parliamentary resolution, yes. A unanimous resolution saying 94, that we have to recover all of the rest of the Kashmir, the Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, so it is not an internal affair. So I think the statement he's made is quite all right. I don't worry about Bernie Sanders. you deal with the government that comes to power. Say Pakistan, a general rules Pakistan, you deal with it. An elected government with two-thirds majority like Nawaz Sharif comes to power and the army then pulls him down, you deal with it. A hybrid government like Imran Khan, who doesn't have one-third, one-fourth the powers of what a prime minister has, it's there, you deal with it. So you deal with, it's a democracy, America, you deal with the government that comes in. But definitely, if it's a democratic government, particularly if it's a Bernie Sanders government, there will be changes. And initially, those will look quite troublesome, but nothing ongoing will stop because there is far too much juice in this relationship. And it's my belief that once a government comes into power in a big country, it's just another government.
So two things, Shekhar. One, on the one hand, Trump does not go to Pakistan on this trip, although Barack Obama also did not go when he came to India twice in 2010 and 2015. But here is Trump not going to Pakistan. On the other hand, he keeps saying, my good friend Imran Khan, Pakistan is a good friend of mine. So is this like a double jeopardy with India? Because if Modi government has said that it's not going to talk to Pakistan, then what is Trump trying to do?
Well, first of all, Trump going to Pakistan, why should India bother? It would have been a question if he had done both on the same trip, because then you are back to the old hyphenation. Okay. That's a two-country rule, as the Americans used to talk about. And knowing Trump, he may just land up there any day. I do believe, however, in this case, that his security would have been paranoid about his going there, because Pakistan, even when Clinton had gone to Pakistan, it was a very carefully done bubble, and he spoke from a distance. He did not mesh with anybody. It's a dangerous place. Particularly for an American president. So at the same time, I don't rule out Trump landing up there. And see, what is Trump saying? Trump is making a very clever statement. And why should he not be making clever statements? He said that you have problems with Pakistan. I have great relations with Pakistan. Your problem with Pakistan is terrorism. That's my problem also. So I'm putting great pressure on Pakistan, and they are listening and they're cleaning up their act. Although, mind you, when he was speaking in Motera, when he started talking of Pakistan, I could sense that the crowd was expecting some kind of a condemnation, so they'll break out in cheers. But when he said, we have a great relationship with Pakistan, etc., there was a hush in the crowd, almost like Sachin Tendulkar had got out instead of hitting a six on a ground in India. But he is coming from a sovereign country which has strategic interests in Pakistan as well, because Pakistan's geostrategic positioning is such that an American president cannot ignore it.
So several questions, Shekhar, on furthering U.S. corporate interests in India, asked by Sikandar Benz. And some other questions on the defense purchases that India has made or is planning to make worth $3 billion. And also Ritik Sharda is asking an Iran question, but Parimal A is saying, do you think, sir, that Trump was too busy in his domestic politics to take this visit seriously? And another one, Vinay Jain, says that do you feel that India and US accomplished the level of significant deals that both had hoped? And was this a pre-election necessity for Trump to visit India? So essentially on the question of trade and a corporate question.
See, trade, etc., are not done on summits. A lot of the work is done beforehand, so you know what's going to happen. No breakthroughs happen at summits in these complicated situations. Second, India itself has taken a very protectionist view on trade. In fact, we had Montek Singh Ahluwalia on our Off the Cuff just the other day, who pointed out that this government has been saying, the Commerce Minister has been saying that free trade agreements the previous government, Congress government, signed have done India a great deal of damage, and they're going to review all of them and maybe reverse many of them. And he said that if you look at the economic survey put forward by the same government on the eve of this budget, that says, on the contrary, that these free trade agreements have been very good for India. But the BJP's ideological, philosophical, and instinctive position is protectionist. And is really rooted back in the 60s, which is imports are bad, exports are good, import substitution, export encouragement, etc. At the same time, strong rupee. It's all very distorted economics. But again, BJP government in India is not the only one playing distorted economics. That is some kind of a norm right now. So no breakthrough was going to happen. I'd say that defense purchases are very small. $3 billion, I can count for you at least 10 Indian PSUs, forget a Reliance or somebody, PSUs, who buy worth more than that from America every couple of months. I mean, if Boeing got its act together with 737 MAX, think of the number of planes that SpiceJet and the rest will buy.
They have ordered over about 200 or
Yeah, but it's just that Boeing is having problems with that aircraft. So just the amount, just the size of that deal will be much bigger than this $3 billion. I think defense deals, just because they look so high profile, we tend to exaggerate their importance.
Right. Some questions on China, Shekhar. And
having said that, I'd like to say that it will be probably the first time in India's history that India will be using lethal equipment brought from America. So our first lethal equipment from
what?
America, well, the howitzers, mountain howitzers are coming, Apache helicopters, because everything we had bought so far from America was non-lethal, C-130s, C-17s, Chinooks. These were non-lethal.
So there has been a decision that's been taken to shed Soviet hardware and to buy American.
Well, yes, but in a lot of the areas, Russians don't have equivalents.
Russian hardware, sorry.
Yeah, Russians don't have equivalents. So there is no compulsion anymore to continue to buy from Russia. And in many technology areas, Russia has fallen way behind now.
So some questions on China, Shekhar, some also connecting this with Trump's comments at the Motera Stadium, where he did not name China, but he talks about countries which have repressive regimes and compares it to India, which unleashes its people. So this is a bit of a tongue twister, this name. Pradyumna Reddy Cherla wants to know, does China feel insecure by this visit, and how will this affect our bilateral relationship with China and Russia?
Well, China is irritated by many things. I mean, tomorrow if the Dalai Lama sneezed, Chinese will get irritated. But those are postures. I think the Chinese are mature and India is mature. Right. And Chinese know that India is mature. So the Chinese know that India is not going to get carried away and suddenly become America's policeman or America's point man in the region or Indo-Pacific. Right. Countries work in their own interest. Countries don't work for each other. No nations work for each other. Even if one country works for the other, it's doing so in its own interest. So India has interests with China. America doesn't share any border with China. India shares a very large border in China, even though, as we now believe, at one point, Trump asked Modi, why are you so worried about China? It's not as if you share your border with China, but that's Trump. So India has a long border with China. India has many opportunities, many threats, many issues with China. So India will handle this very carefully with China and with Russia, because ultimately in politics and diplomacy, leverage is what works for you. So China and Russia are also India's leverage.
So a couple of more China questions. Govind Mantonkar is asking, is US the only option India has to balance China? Is there any alternative? And Anirban Ray, please discuss more on his indirect attack on China.
Well, first of all, the best way to balance China for India is not the US, not Russia, not God Almighty, not anybody. It is to strengthen its own economy, its own military, its own global standing. So it's the same old story of खुद ही को कर बुलंद इतना कि हर तकदीर से पहले खुदा बंदे से खुद पूछे बता तेरी रज़ा क्या है. तो आपको अपनी औकात ऊंची करनी पड़ेगी. अमेरिका के अंकल आपको नहीं बचाएगा. So that to think that India can use America to balance China is short-sighted. Yet these alliances are very useful because you need to have friends. The problem with India was that for decades, it got so close to the Soviet Union. India's non-alignment from 1969 onwards was bakwas. India was not a non-aligned country. It was a Soviet ally. Look at India's voting record on invasion in Afghanistan. Look at India's voting record in Cambodia, Kampuchea, so many things. India voted as, or on Israel. India voted as the Soviets wanted India to vote. Right. So India, for a long time, did not have an ally. post-Cold War. Now India, because India has a standing, India has alliances and countries have vested interest in India. That's why even in Europe, even though some Scandinavians and couple of the others make some statements here and there, you have among the strongest European countries, two of them, Britain and France, looking very differently. In fact, looking at India very differently. Both have distanced themselves from this overly politically correct classical EU position. One, in any case, has left EU also.
Right. So, Kannan SV, I'm sorry I didn't ask your question before. It's also
to add to this, if India wants to neutralize China, India has to go back to growing at 8% and keep that for the next 10, 15 years. And India has to make sure that it keeps its social cohesion and harmony, and things of the kind that happen in Delhi never happen again.
So, Kannan SV, Shekhar has already answered your question on how the evolving Indo-US strategic and trade partnership will have implications on the India-China relationship. Shekhar, last couple of questions on India-US trade. Kunal Kashyap is asking, India-US trade stands at $142 billion. What do you think is its potential going to be? And are we dependent on US for our exports, especially IT?
Well, the US is a very big market. In fact, India with US has a very large trade surplus. Unlike China, with China, where India has a very large trade deficit. Right. So Trump keeps complaining that I have a trade deficit with India, I want more balance. Modi is trying to answer that by buying more oil and gas from America. So that's a Gujarati way of dealing with the situation. And it's a clever way. Because India has to buy oil and gas from somewhere. So I think $142 billion actually shows a big unrealized potential. This trade can definitely double. Because if India gets its act together with manufacturing, I don't know when that will happen. If India does that, then given the way wages are rising in China, India can expand its markets in America. And for services, if America is such a big market, that's because America is a very big market nevertheless. It is the largest economy in the world. It has a smaller population than India, say about less than 1/4 of India. But its per capita income is almost 35 times of India. So it's a country with a lot of spending power. It's a growing country.
We'll have to leave it there. President Trump is leaving India tonight. He gets back on his plane to go back home. So 36 hours in India. We will continue to watch this story. Shekhar will continue to take lots of questions over the next few days on Cut the Clutter. But please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And thank you so much for watching.
And make sure your friends and family do so as well.